Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. We are exploring a fascinating experiment today where a creator, they go by the Loki Christian Online, basically sat down and read every single verse in the Bible about money.
Literally all of them.
All of them. And the revelation. It completely flips our modern understanding of wealth, debt, and generosity.
It really does.
Right. So we're going to dive into this profound evaluation of God, faith, and what we truly worship, contrasting this ancient divine wisdom with the secular world's absolute obsession with accumulation.
And honestly, it exposes a massive blind spot in how we all operate today.
Oh, totally.
Because, we're trained to treat money purely as a numbers game, right? Budgeting, saving, optimizing. But this source material reveals money to be one of the clearest mirrors of the human heart.
It's an uncomfortable mirror, too. And hey, before we really get into the weeds here, just a quick note for you listening. If you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button.
It really helps out.
It does. Okay, so setting the stage here. To understand this experiment, we have to start with this big contrast.
The amount versus the alignment.
Exactly. Before we can analyze how to spend money, we really have to look at how we view the money already in our hands.
Yeah, because society operates on this unspoken rule, right? Like,
Yeah.
You just have a little more, you'll be secure.
Just one more race.
Right. But the ancient texts completely ignore the amount. There's this one famous story the creator brings up.
Oh, the widow.
Yeah, the widow. So the story goes that people are dropping money into the temple treasury. Rich folks are throwing in these massive, heavy sums of cash.
Making a big show of it.
Exactly. And then this widow walks up and drops in 2 tiny coins. And the divine perspective in the text says she actually gave more than all the wealthy people combined.
Which makes zero mathematical sense.
Right. But it makes perfect spiritual sense because she gave out of her lack, not her leftovers. It shows that God, or the divine, isn't looking at the size of the paycheck. The focus is entirely on the heart's alignment. God doesn't need your money, right? He wants your heart.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is a total paradigm shift. It makes me think of, well, it's like physical fitness.
Oh, how so?
Like you don't wait until you're an Olympic athlete to start going to the gym.
Right, you'd literally never get there.
Exactly. And you shouldn't wait until you're a millionaire to start being generous. It's a muscle you have to train.
That's a really good analogy.
But I do want to push back slightly here.
Yeah.
Because I can hear someone asking, does this imply that people who are barely scraping by, like people in poverty, are actually in a uniquely powerful position to demonstrate true faith?
I see why it sounds that way, but no, it's not romanticizing poverty at all.
Right.
What the source material is highlighting is a psychological reality. Money doesn't actually change your heart. It just amplifies it.
A magnifying glass.
Exactly. If you're clutching $20 with a closed fist out of fear, you're going to clutch $2 million with that exact same closed fist.
That is so true.
Faithfulness begins with what is currently in your hands. It's about living open-handed right now, rather than, waiting for some hypothetical future where you finally feel rich enough to give.
A future that, let's be honest, might never come.
Precisely.
So, if true generosity requires this open-handed posture, we have to talk about the biggest obstacle that literally clamps our hands shut.
Yeah. Debt.
Debt. The creator dives into this ancient proverb that says, basically, the borrower is slave to the lender.
It's brutal language.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it frames debt not just as a math problem, but as a profound spiritual issue.
Because it costs you your peace.
It costs your freedom, your spiritual clarity.
When every paycheck is already spoken for, to pay off credit cards or whatever, you are literally chained to your financial past.
Spending today's hours to pay for yesterday's stuff.
Exactly. And that makes it incredibly hard to say, obey a prompt, to give, or to take a leap of faith, or do something new. Your hands are tied.
I get that, but man, in a world where almost everyone has a mortgage or a car loan, debt is just normalized.
Oh, completely.
We call it leverage. So is the source saying we should feel guilty just for existing in a modern economy? Like, are we supposed to feel shame for having a credit card?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the creator makes it very clear this isn't about shame or guilt.
Okay, good.
Yeah, because most people simply weren't taught any other way to manage money. It's the water we swim in.
Right. The system basically requires it.
It does. But the text is pointing out that living within your means isn't just about being like a responsible adult. It's about availability.
Availability, I like that word.
Yeah, laying down debt frees you up to serve God or follow your true purpose. Rather than just serving lenders, you're buying back your own agency.
So you're not just a cog in the wheel.
Right.
Which actually leads us right into the central conflict of this whole deep dive. The reason debt chains us, and the reason we struggle with this alignment, it all boils down to what we truly worship.
The worship problem.
Yeah. There's a famous passage the Creator highlights, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
It's the ultimate lie detector.
It really is. And it's fascinating because in these texts, God talks about money almost as much as faith or salvation.
Which surprises a lot of people.
Yeah. And why is that?
Yeah.
Because money is the ultimate test of worship.
Well, and let's clarify something from one of the letters in the source text, because it's always misquoted.
Oh, the root of all evil thing.
Yes. People say money is the root of all evil. The text doesn't say that.
Right. Money is just neutral. It's paper.
Exactly. It says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
The obsession.
The dependency. It's this deep belief that more money brings ultimate safety. And that, fundamentally, is a worship problem.
Because you're trusting a paycheck more than you trust God's provision.
Right. And I want to pause here because we should look at this impartially.
Right.
Whether you are coming from a deeply religious theistic background or a purely secular atheistic background, this psychological dynamic is real.
Oh, totally. In an atheistic worldview, it actually makes logical sense to worship money, right?
How so?
Well, if the material world is all there is, and there is no divine safety net, then mathematically you are your own provider. You have to hoard to be safe.
Right. You have to build your own fortress.
Exactly. But this divine wisdom completely challenges that secular obsession. It claims there is a provider.
And that changes everything about how you interact with your resources.
It really does. I actually had this vivid realization reading through this project. It's the idea that your budget tells the truth, your lips might not.
Oh, wow. That hits hard.
Doesn't it? I started framing a budget as a spiritual audit.
A spiritual audit. I like that.
Yeah, it's a literal receipt of what you value most. You can say you value faith or generosity, but if your audit shows you just value comfort, appearance, and expensive vacations.
Then your worship is pointed at comfort.
Exactly.
Worship isn't just, singing in a church on Sunday. It's about what you trust the most when things get hard.
Right.
When God is first, money becomes this incredibly useful tool. But when money is first, it becomes a terrible master.
It dictates all your choices.
Yeah. So the real question for you listening is, what would it look like if your money habits actually matched your faith?
That is a tough question, because if we actually did that, we would have to completely rebuild our definition of what it means to be wealthy.
We'd have to tear the old one down entirely.
Because right now, we are so programmed by the world.
Kingdom wealth versus worldly wealth.
Yes. Let's get into that. The world's definition of wealth is just more.
Always more.
More stuff. Upgrades, maximum security, endless accumulation.
But the source material defines wealth as godliness with contentment.
Right, contentment.
True wealth, according to this, is not having more. It's actually needing less.
Needing less. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the irony is so thick.
Oh, yeah.
The secular world tells us we're wealthy when we ask, what can I keep?
Oh.
Right, like how big is my pile?
How big is the vault?
Exactly. But the source material says true wealth is found when we ask, what can I give?
It completely shifts the drive.
Yeah, from flexing your status to just, faithfulness.
Well, and think about the psychological relief in that framework.
That must be huge.
It really is, because the pursuit of worldly wealth, it makes contentment literally impossible.
Hedonic treadmill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more you crave, the more you fear losing what you have. You get the bigger house. Now you have to worry about the higher taxes and the bigger roof.
You're just constantly guarding the pile.
But heavenly wealth, knowing your worth is in a savior and not a savings account,
Right.
it offers eternal significance instead of temporary status. Earthly cars fade, houses age, markets crash. But this spiritual wealth brings priceless peace.
So if true wealth is needing less and having that peace, then the ultimate physical proof of that transformation is giving.
The physical proof. Yes.
The ultimate test of trust.
Because giving, in this context, isn't just some Christian check box.
Yeah, it's not a club fee.
Exactly. It's not just tithing 10% to keep the lights on. It's entirely about trust.
The Creator points out this one passage. I think it's the only place in the Bible where God actually invites people to test him.
Yeah, it's a wild
It
passage.
invites people to bring the whole tithe, test him, and see if he won't open the floodgates of heaven.
But you have to couple that with the other text that says, God loves a cheerful giver, not someone giving under compulsion.
No guilt offerings.
Right. God doesn't want your money if you're just throwing it out of guilt.
Okay, but I have to ask, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, when the source talks about testing God with money and seeing the floodgates open, how do we separate that from a transactional, like, get-rich-quick mindset?
The prosperity gospel stuff.
Yeah, where we just give to God so he acts like a divine slot machine and pays us back with interest.
Right, that is a huge misconception.
Yeah,
But the Creator clarifies this brilliantly based strictly on the text.
okay, how so?
God isn't chasing funding.
Right,
He's trying to free us. Giving is fundamentally about releasing control.
releasing control.
When you give, especially when it's hard or inconvenient or the budget is tight, you are making a physical, visceral declaration.
You're saying, this paycheck doesn't own me.
Exactly. God does. It induces this state of like artificial scarcity that proves to your own brain that you will survive without hoarding.
Wow. It breaks the atheistic assumption that you are your own only provider.
Yes. It is an invitation to experience how God provides when you finally let go.
Man, that is powerful. It really does upend everything.
It's a completely different operating system for life.
It really is. Well, to review the journey we've been on today, we started by moving from just looking at amounts to actually aligning our hearts.
Right. Getting the posture right.
Then we talked about shedding that massive spiritual weight of debt and recognizing what we truly worship.
God versus money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which leads to redefining wealth, stepping off that secular treadmill, and finally, using giving as the ultimate expression of trust.
It's a lot to process.
It is. And as
Yeah.
we wrap up, I know you had a final thought you wanted to leave everyone with.
Yeah, just a lingering kind of provocative thought that really builds on this whole source material.
Let's hear it.
Imagine an archaeologist, right?
Mm,
100 years from now,
okay.
and they dig up your last 6 months of bank statements and credit card bills.
Oh, boy.
And they have no other information about you. No journal, no social media, just the data, based purely on where your money went. Who or what would they conclude was the God of your life?
Wow. That is, yeah, that's something to chew on.
It really puts the spiritual audit into perspective.
It does. Well, a massive thank you to everyone listening for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep questioning those defaults.
Absolutely. Keep learning, keep evaluating where your true treasure lies. We'll see you next time.